How are you? How are you? Are you there? Can you hear me? Are you there? Can you hear me? Are you okay? So very good. Now please, you have to start into, you have to have before you your notes. I want to work about friction, and I have some video clips for you to better understand this theme. And before anything, please, we want to know what friction is. And as you can see here, you can see an image. This is a ball, and this ball is moving toward your right hand, and friction is another force that is moving in an opposite direction to the movement of the ball. So when we talk about friction, we are talking about forces. Okay, maybe you remember that we were talking about machines, and machines are objects or tools that help us to make easier our work. And all work in physics terms is about movement, about motion. So we're talking about forces, about motion, and friction is the resistance of motion when one object rubs against another. Remember that, and friction works against the motion and acts in the opposite direction, slowing the movement object down. So remember, we're talking about forces, and friction is just one of these forces that are acting over the movement of any object. And with that in mind, please, we're going to see one interesting video clip. So pay attention, because we are going to watch
force and motion.
This. Okay, pay attention.
Imagine you're playing in a playground. Think of all the things around you that can move. The seesaw goes up and down. The swings go back and forth. The merry-go-round goes around in a circle. There are so many ways in which things move. Everything we just described is a type of motion. Motion is movement from one place to another. When the seesaw is still and you and a friend sit on it, it begins to have motion. One seat goes up while the other goes down. They change their positions. Position is the place where you are. If you change your position, you are moving. There are different types of motion. If you swing on the swings, that's a back and forth motion. It's also an up and down motion. If you ride on a merry-go-round, you'll be going round and round in a circle.
So remember, we're talking about different kind of motions. So this is a run and round motions. Can be another motion that is up and down or back and forth. Remember that. Talking about force and motion. To speak about friction, remember that.
If you run forward with a back and forth motion to dodge a friend while playing tag, that's a zigzag motion. Or you can run in a straight motion to the base. There are also different speeds of motion. Speed is how fast you move. What speed do you go at when you're on the swings? It can be fast and exciting, or slow and relaxing. On a merry-go-round, you can start off slow and go faster and faster. You may run fast when you pass your friend playing tag and slow down when you get to base. Many things are in motion around us. but some things are standing still. How do we get them in motion? What makes something move? Think about a toy car or truck. Pretend it's sitting on the floor in front of you. How
Attention, the question is what makes things move? And the answer is force. You see here, force. Remember, we want to end up talking about friction.
could you get it to move? You might use your hand or foot to push it away or pull it toward you. You might hit it with another object, for example, a ball. You could even blow on it. There are many ways to get things to move. The push or pull that we use to make things move is called a force. A force is needed to make anything move.
This is important. A force is what we need to make anything move. So a force produces movement, and the force that opposes the movement is friction.
Let's look at things a person pushes and pulls in one morning. This man pushes an alarm clock to make it stop ringing when he wakes up. He pulls the blankets off himself and uses his legs to push his body up. He pulls open a cabinet to get out his breakfast. He pulls out a bowl and a spoon. He pulls the chair back to sit down and pulls it back in under the table.
All of these are forces, okay? All of these are forces that produce movement. So we're talking about forces and motion.
His teeth push and pull the food. When he's done eating, he pulls up all the food items on the table and pushes them back in the cabinet or fridge. He pushes a washcloth across the dishes to clean them. That's a lot of pushes and pulls. Now, let's use another example of motion. Riding a bike. You use force to get a bike to move. How? By pushing and pulling the pedals. Once the bike is moving, what else can you do? You can go faster by using more force, pushing and pulling harder.
So the more force you use, the faster you move.
You can slow down by using less force, not pushing and pulling as hard. You can change which way you're going by using force, by pulling the handlebar, which pulls the wheels in another direction.
So you can master your force, the force you are using to move, in order to change direction.
What can you do to stop? Well, you can do two things.
Two things. Remember, you want to stop your movement. So you can do two things. Be attentive.
You can use force to stop by putting on the brakes. Or you can just stop pedaling and you will stop moving after a while. That's because there's another force acting on your bike's wheels. It's called friction.
Now friction, we get there. Now friction, if you use friction, you can stop your movement.
It means the wheels are rubbing against the road, and that rubbing will eventually slow them down to a stop.
So, when two different objects are rubbing against each other, friction appears. Okay, remember that friction acts in the opposite direction of your movement. Oh, sorry.
Stop. But if there were no friction and no other force stopping it, your bike would just keep rolling on forever.
Remember, we need friction because otherwise we would be moving forever. So friction is something that stops, that opposes our movement and is really necessary for us to live, because otherwise we would keep on moving.
Now let's summarize what we have learned.
So, remember, many things around us can move, and movement is also called motion. Everything needs a push or a pull to get it moving. This push or pull is called a force. Very good, very good. And now, please go back to another different video clip about friction. So now we're talking about friction, specifically about friction.
What is friction? Friction is the reason we are not constantly slipping and sliding on floors, roads, and everywhere. Friction is the force that is created when two surfaces move or try to move across each other.
So friction, when you want to get friction, you need two surfaces, two different surfaces, okay? And depending of the material of these surfaces, the friction is bigger or smaller. It all depends.
The amount of friction produced during this process depends on the texture of both the surfaces and the amount of contact force that is pushing the two surfaces together. The force acts in the opposite direction to the way an object wants to slide.
Okay, so when you want to stop your bicycle, you press the brake and your bicycle slows down because of the friction between the brakes and the wheels. And the important thing is that this boy is moving toward our left part, but friction is acting in the opposite direction. Okay?
When you want to stop your bicycle, you press the brake, and your bicycle slows down because of the friction created between the brakes and the wheels. Different solid objects experience different amount of frictions. An eraser on a glass-top table will experience more friction than a coin, which will experience more friction than an ice cube on the same table.
Okay, so friction depends on the texture of the different surfaces. So it's not the same an eraser, and a coin, or an ice cube that is moving on this surface. It all depends on the surfaces of the different objects.
Why do you slip and fall when the floor has just been mopped? This is because liquid creates a barrier between the ground and your...
Now this is another different surface. In this case, we're talking about a liquid. This is water. And your experience says that when you are walking on a wet surface, you are stepping on water, you are experiencing less friction. And that is because of the water. This is another object, in this case a liquid, and it changes friction.
Your shoes and makes the friction a lot less. It is because of less friction that you hear of many accidents during monsoons. Even though the friction of the brakes is still there, the brakes may be wet, and the wheels are not in as much contact with the ground because of the water. Project. Slide a coin across a marble floor and then slide the same coin across a concrete pavement.
So this is a kind of project you can do at home if you want. You can slide the coin across a marble floor and then slide the same coin across a concrete pavement. Concrete means in Spanish cemento, okay? And you can see the difference you notice, and you can ask yourself why this happened.
What difference do you notice? Why does this happen?
So very good. Now please let's go back to our notes. So now about friction and energy. So remember that we were talking about energy in other days, and now we're going to relate friction on energy. So the amount of friction depends on the materials from which the two surfaces are made. You know that. So the rougher the surface, the more friction is produced. And when an object slows down, it loses energy. However, the energy doesn't disappear. Why? Because this changes for kinetic energy. Remember, kinetic means the energy due to movement, to heat energy. And in this image, you can see the effects of friction in this match. Okay, so this friction, that is kinetic energy, changes into heat energy. Okay, so that's interesting. And now we have here three different types of friction. There are maybe more, okay, but these are the most important. So we have dry friction, that is also called static friction, and that happens when two solid objects touch each other. So you can see this man is trying to move this object, okay, and the movement goes in this direction, and friction acts in the opposite direction. That's why this is the effort. The effort this man is doing is to overcome the force of friction. So this is dry friction. But this is also called static friction. But you have another kind of friction, fluid friction. And fluids are, this is a word that holds together liquid and gases. So fluid frictions involves a fluid, a liquid, or a gas. And then we have rolling friction, and it occurs when a round surface rolls over a flat surface. And now I'd like you to watch another documentary about real life examples of frictions. Pay attention.
Así que quieres aprender inglés. Aquí tienes 3 mitos que son completamente falsos. 1. Debes hablar mucho.
Friction allows this person to climb these boulders, and friction also allows
So you want to climb a cliff, you need friction, okay, because you need kind of support your feet. This is another example, another form of friction.
to strike a match. Welcome to Moo Math in Science and Friction. Friction is the force that opposes the motion between any surfaces that are in contact. There are at least 4 types of friction. Static,
So static friction is a kind of dry friction. So sliding is a kind of fluid friction.
sliding, rolling, and fluid friction. Static sliding and rolling friction occur between solid surfaces, and fluid friction occurs in liquids and gases. Static friction occurs when an object is resting on a surface. The static friction between these boots and the snow allows
So these boots, this snow, this is static friction.
this person to stand and shovel snow. When you rub your hands together, you experience sliding friction.
So this is sliding friction. You are changing kinetic energy into heat energy. When you rub your hands, you are changing kinetic energy due to the movement to heat energy. You do that to get warmer.
When you ride a bike, you depend on the rolling friction of the tires.
This is rolling friction. Easy.
And skydiving depends on the fluid friction between the air and hopefully the parachute opening to slow the person down. Friction is used in everyday life. Sometimes you want a great deal of friction, like the gripping power of tires, and other times, like when you go skating, you want low friction so that you can glide across the ice. Most land vehicles rely on friction for acceleration and changing direction, and fluid friction contributes to aerodynamic drag, which is the resistance to forward motion.
Okay, so this is air, this is air, and these airplanes are designed to work with the fluid friction of the air.
So that race cars are sleek and aerodynamic to reduce this fluid friction and go faster. Your shoes provide friction which allows you to move forward. Also, if the friction is really low, like on ice, it's challenging to drive a car because of the low friction. Skis on snow work the same ways, and the low friction allows the ski to glide quickly over the ice or snow. Sandpaper, on the other hand, works because its surface increases the amount of friction. Wax is applied to surfboards to increase friction and grip.
This is a kind of fluid friction, okay? Because you have here a board, and here below you have water. Water is a fluid, so this is a fluid friction, or yes, a fluid friction, or sliding friction.
And you put oil on chains and gears to decrease.
So this is interesting. So you want to slow the friction in these gears. You need to put oil. Why? Because if you put oil between these teeth, you are preventing these teeth to get damaged. Okay, so this is the result of putting oil in these gears.
Increase friction, and this allows the chain to work more efficiently. And finally, the wheels on this skateboard create a great deal of friction and allows these people to go up and down skateboard ramps. If you'd like to know more about friction, this playlist will help. And as always, thanks for watching.
Okay, so very good. Now please, you need to get your exercises. So, and I need your participation here in this exercise. Talking about friction, exercise number 8. So, explain if you agree with this statement and say your reasons. So, in the first exercise, reads, although wheels are great for rolling and reducing friction, they couldn't work without friction. Do you agree or not? Is that true, according to your view, or not? Although wheels are great for rolling and reducing friction, they couldn't work without friction. What do you think? Is that true or not, according to your view? I'm waiting for your answers. What do you think? Number 1, do you agree or not? So, you need wheels to move faster, but do wheels need friction to work? Do wheels need friction to work? What do you think? What do you think? Do you agree with that sentence? And Victor says that he agrees. It is the only one. And the rest of you, are you attentive? I don't know. Nico agrees as well. Yes, because otherwise you couldn't pull the brake. Okay. And you need friction, a small amount of friction to get moving. So let's move to number 2. So it would be really nice just to stand up without friction. Do you agree with that? A word without friction. Would it be nice or not? Is that true or not? What do you think? Number 2. Would it be nice just stand up without friction? Would it be nice? In that moment, you couldn't stop moving. Do you think? And Victor says no. But Fran, I think, says 2. You don't agree? Why not, Nico? Candela says false. Can you imagine? Can you imagine your life in movement and you can't stop moving? That is ugly. Okay, no, it's impossible. Number 3. What about this sentence? Friction can never generate static electricity. Static electricity. You remember when we studied static electricity, lightning. You remember the Benjamin Franklin experiment. Friction can never generate static electricity. Do you agree with that? Guille says, I don't agree, I think. And Victor says, this is false. No, actually the opposite is true. So friction is what generates static electricity. Okay, because if you want to make the experiment with your hair, you want to get your hair on end, you need to practice friction with a balloon. So friction is necessary to generate static electricity. So number 4, the harder two surfaces are pressed together, the more force it takes to overcome the friction and get them to slide. What do you think about that? The harder two surfaces are pressed together, the more force it takes to overcome the friction and get them to slide. Is that true? According to you, do you think, Ramon? Victor says that's true. What do you think? The rest of you? Fran says this is true. Macarena, very good, Diana. Yes, that's true. That's obvious. And finally, number 5, fluid friction is used. Fluid friction is used a lot in water parks, so we can slide smoothly and fast down giant slides. So fluid friction is used a lot in water parks to slide smoothly and fast. What do you think? Fluid friction is used in these cases. What do you think? Yes, that's true. Now pay attention here, because many of you did it wrong, this exercise. So you have to draw arrows. I have no tool here. You have to be attentive to my arrowhead here. So showing the forces acting on these objects. When an object is moving, or when an object is stationary, different forces are acting there. So take a look at this plane. In this plane, several forces are acting. One of them, always, the force of gravity. The force of gravity is represented with an arrow in this direction. So from up, down. Okay, this is the force of gravity. But this plane isn't falling down. And why? Because on this plane there are some forces that are overcoming or winning over the force of gravity. One of them is because there is a force that is pulling the plane up, and then there is another force that is pulling the plane to the left. So you have to draw here 3 different arrows. One of them towards the surface, toward the earth. Another one with the same force up. And finally, you need another force that is pointing out to your right, to your left. Okay, and in this case, the same here. There are two forces that are acting the parachute. One of them, the gravity, okay, towards the earth, and another, the force of friction due to the air that is acting up, okay, this direction. Okay, the result is that this boy is falling down, but smoothly. And take a look here. So this person is trying to move this object to your right, and the friction acts in the opposite direction. So you have one force that is pointing down, another force is due to this man is pointing right, and friction is pointing left. Remember that. So let's move to this exercise. So take a look to this boy, and forces that are acting. One of them is in this direction. Okay, this is the force of the movement of the boy, and friction is acting in the opposite direction. Okay, very good. And finally, so this chopper shows some forces. One of them is the force of gravity. The gravity points just to the earth, and then with this propeller there is another force that is acting, it is in the opposite direction, and then with this back propelling, there is a force that allows the chopper to get moving. Okay, fourth. Very good, very good. And now I have another, before the next exercise, I have another video clip for you, very interesting, to better understand friction. Pay attention, this is a video clip about the types of friction. Pay attention.
If you and a friend were playing catch outside and you threw the ball over your friend's head, would the ball keep rolling forever once it hit the ground? Of course not. The ball would come to a complete stop after rolling a few feet on the grass. Why do you think this is? What is it about the interaction between the ball and the grass that causes the ball's motion to stop? The answer is friction. Friction is the force created when two objects rub against each other. This force applies to all objects. Friction always acts in the opposite direction of an object's motion. There is friction between your jacket and your t-shirt. There is friction between an airplane and the air through which it flies. There is even friction between your skin and the water in the ocean when you go swimming. Friction can be broken down into three specific categories: sliding friction, rolling friction, and fluid friction. Sliding friction occurs when two solid surfaces slide over each other. Sledding illustrates this type of friction perfectly.
This is a slide, okay? This is sliding friction. One of the three tapes, according to this video clip.
When you sled down a hill covered in snow, the solid bottom of the sled slides across the solid packed snow. Another example of sliding friction is built into the word itself, a slide. When you go down a slide, the solid of your body moves across the plastic or metal material of the slide.
So this is another example of sliding friction, okay?
The second type of friction is rolling friction. Rolling friction occurs when an object rolls across a surface. The opening example of a ball dropped on the ground is an example of rolling friction. A bicycle is another great example of rolling friction. Imagine you are cycling down a street. If you stop pedaling and just coast, your bicycle's wheels will eventually roll to a stop. Without more pedaling, the friction of the wheels against the ground will stop the bicycle's motion. The final type of friction is fluid friction. Fluid friction occurs when a solid object moves through a fluid or a gas. Have you ever had to walk home in a storm? The strong winds likely made it difficult for you to move forward. When you are outside in a storm, the fluid friction between you and the air is increased. A swimming pool is another great place to study fluid friction.
This is fluid friction, so swimming pool. Why? Because any liquid or gas is a fluid.
When you are in a pool, there is constant friction between your body and the water. Because the force of the friction slows you down, you have to paddle constantly. If no friction were present, you could glide all the way across the pool with one stroke. All three types of friction act in the opposite direction of an object's motion. However, each type differs in how the friction is created.
So, very good. Now, let's go back to our last exercise. So, now number 10. I need your contribution here. I need your participation. So, number 10. What has friction to do with hands rubbing together? And the answer is that we are changing kinetic energy into. So, be attentive. When we wrap our hands together, we are changing kinetic energy due to the movement into another kind of energy. And we need friction to do that. You remember the other kind of energy that is produced when we wrap our hands together? Asking for the other kind of energy that turns out when we wrap our hands together. We move kinetic energy into energy. Very good, Victor. Into heat energy or thermal energy. Very good. And what happens when a lighter is working? So, for a lighter to work, we need friction. Okay, this stone here, you have here a kind of circle, okay, with teeth, and is frictioning a stone that we can't see here. And the result is that this movement is changed into another kind of energy. Anybody? The kind of energy that appears when we practice friction in a lighter. Waiting for you. So, when a lighter is working, a new kind of energy appears because of the friction. When we wrap this teeth wheel, to with the stone that we can't see here, there appears heat energy as well. Okay, and the same can be said about these three examples. So, making fire with wood, you remember in prehistoric times, the way to produce fire was to practice friction. This is an image about that. So, friction, but this stick with this other material, okay, this is able to produce fire. So we are changing kinetic energy due to friction into heat energy. And this is the other example. We have seen already lighting a match. So we change friction due to the movement. When we strike a match, we produce heat energy. And these sparks of fire, when we are sharpening iron, are due to the friction. As you can see here. Very good. I think we have time to we can leave it at that. I think we have time to watch another very interesting video clip about some experiments about friction. And pay attention. Friction is a fourth. Good.
Hi, I'm Jared. Welcome to Fun Science Demos. The big idea today is that friction is a force. And through science, we've discovered that friction happens anytime two things rub against each other. Friction wants to slow things down. So I have a really simple setup. I have a cardboard ramp and a plain wooden block. Why is the block not sliding down the ramp? The force of gravity wants to pull that block down the ramp. What's keeping it still? The force of friction. The force of friction is actually stronger than the force of gravity.
That's why this block can't move, because the force of friction is stronger than gravity. But looks.
What happens if I increase the force of gravity? I'm going to raise my ramp. What happened was the force of gravity became stronger than the force of friction. Friction held the block in place. Gravity was just too strong, and it overcame the friction. Now, through science, we've discovered that the force of friction is different with different surfaces. I have a wooden block that's plain and smooth, and the same wooden block, but I've attached a piece of sandpaper,
Attention,
and then
sandpaper.
another same wooden block, but I've wrapped it in aluminum foil.
Sorry, sandpaper is papel de lija. Okay, sandpaper. So the friction is greater here, and this is a block of wood with a smooth surface, and this is aluminum foil. Pay attention.
Now, through science, we've discovered that the friction is different on these different surfaces. Let's check it out. I'm going to slowly raise the ramp. Which block do you think will slide first? Which block do you think will slide last? Friction. Here we go. Now, the trick to make this work is you have to go slowly and steadily. Oh, I see some movement. Wow. The aluminum foil slid first. Which do you think is going to be next? Keep raising the slide. Higher. The plain block went next. You can even see the friction in action here. It's hanging on. It doesn't want to move. The sandpaper goes down. Look at the height of that ramp. Friction in action. Science is so cool. Friction is all around us, not just on sliding boards. Take a look at this. I have two pieces of plastic. I'm going to try and spin both of them. Why did it stop spinning? Well, the friction slowed the block down and stopped it from spinning. Check it out, same block. Why did it spin so much longer? Well, so how did we cut down the friction? Well, little glass marbles. The little glass marbles reduce the friction. Believe it or not, it's a lot like your bicycle wheel or your skateboard wheel or even a car tire. They don't have little glass balls in them. They're actually little metal balls called bearings, and you can't always see them because they're packaged up so they don't rust. Nothing happens to them, but it's meant to reduce the friction so your tire spins more easily. Friction is a force. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out our links in our video description.
Okay, very good. Think it was very interesting. Now that's the end of our class today, and
Hi, I'm Jared. Welcome to Fun Science Demo.
And we are finishing. Thanks. Bye bye.